there, and welcome to this week's broadcast. I am Ann LaFollette, and I am a service pattern designer and an online coach who helps creatives build viable businesses online. And today's broadcast is all about the 12 art supplies that every artist needs, and I have tested them all. And in fact, they're more than 12, but I'm going to focus primarily on the 12 that I use all the time. But even before I jump into the list, I have to just tell you the supplies that I have around all the time. And they start with these Canson sketchbooks. So I love these Canson mixed media. They're basically mixed media sketchbooks, and they have a spiral binding. And the reason I like them is because I'm left-handed, and so I can move the spiral binding around when I'm sketching or painting, and I can always make sure that it's out of my way. So I love both the version that's a little bit smaller, that is 7 by 10, and then I also like the version that is that's 9 by 12. A little bit larger, and I just have a ton of these. They're not very expensive. All of the supplies that I mentioned in today's video will be listed down below so that you can grab them if you'd like. And the idea is that these could be a great gift for yourself, or as you start to think about holiday gifts for your friends and family and your colleagues, these could come in really, really handy as you try to check off all of the names on that holiday list. Now, of course, after just a couple of sketchbooks, I always want to make sure that I have Condoroga Dixon No. 2 pencils. I don't use anything more complicated when I'm sketching in pencil. And then I have a couple of different erasers. I have this guy that is basically just a regular plastic eraser, but then I also sometimes use a kneaded eraser, and I don't have one handy, but a kneaded eraser, I'll show you a photograph online right now. A kneaded eraser is one basically that you can mold in your hand. And the difference is that a plastic eraser, when you erase with it, is going to leave a bunch of crumbs on your page, whereas a kneaded eraser actually picks those crumbs up. And so some people really prefer it. All right, so those are the basics. Now let me move into my top 12 supplies that I absolutely love. And I'm going to start with other types of paper. So the first one I really want to introduce you to is something called Yupo. And so here is an image of what it looks like. And Yupo paper, I'm also going to show you an image of some artwork that I did with Yupo paper. Yupo paper is really slick, and it's great for watercolor because you can't really sort of control where it's going to go or how it's going to dry. And so as you can see in these images, it creates some really cool effects. And you have to be willing to experiment. You have to be willing to kind of go with the flow, no pun intended. And you can pick the paper up and kind of move it from side to side to try to move the water in a manner that you might want to control. But my biggest piece of advice is to go with it and see what happens and practice and have fun. Now, as I mentioned, all of these supplies will be listed down below the video so that you can get a hold of them without any trouble. Now, the next thing I wanted to introduce you to is something called rice paper. And this is a really beautiful big, this is a huge, I think it's 12 by 18 individual sheets. And rice paper is very absorbent. And so I don't know if you can see, I was playing around with basically just trying to create lines using the paper. And whenever you put ink on it, it really spreads out very dramatically. And so you can create some super cool different kinds of effects with it, especially if, like me, periodically, you want to experiment with mixed media. So I love Japanese rice paper. Now the third thing is tracing paper. And you might think that tracing paper is sort of an odd choice to have on my list of top 12 products, but it is really fun when you want to loosen up. And I created a video of, which you can see on my blog. If you go to annlafolletteart.com/blog, you can see the blog post version of this video. And in it, I've embedded a video where I used tracing paper to sketch about 20 different apple sketches. And then I just photographed them. I left the camera up above and put the tracing paper down below. And then I would just take a picture, and then I'd flip the page to the next sketch. And then I'd flip the page to the next sketch. And so I created kind of a stop motion video from it, and that was fun. That was not actually the initial intent. The initial intent was just to loosen up and to do as many sketches of the same thing as possible by just not feeling too precious, really loosening up my hand, and tracing paper allows you to do that. So you should totally play with it. I think you'll really enjoy it. So those are the 3 other types of paper that I would love for you to experiment with. Now let's talk about watercolor paints. I have a favorite set of watercolors. I've experimented with a bunch of different watercolors, but the one that I have on my list for you guys is a tiny little set from Newton. It's from Winsor & Newton, and it's a teeny tiny travel pack. And I absolutely love it because, first of all, I really kind of like small things. I like things that are really small because I'm kind of really small. I'm only 5 feet tall. And this pack is awesome. It does come with its own brush, although I wouldn't use it. I'm going to get to brushes in a second. But it has 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. It has 12 different colors in it. And they're really tiny. Look at it. It's like 2 by 2, or it's 2 by 4, or 2 by 3. And they travel really easily. It's got a snap closure so that it will not open up when it's in your bag. You can take it with you everywhere or anywhere. And they come in different color schemes. They might come in I think the one that I have a link to below is the one that is called Fall Colors. And I have just done a whole bunch of watercolor work with them, and I'll show you some images now of how beautiful these colors are and the variety that I was able to get just from this one pack. Now, in addition to watercolors, I have some recommendations about watercolor brushes. Now, I have my handy dandy picture, which I'm going to talk about in a second, but one set of brushes that I recommend to start with are this set. They're all blue. They have a blue handle, and they are all called Princeton Select. And there's a link below the video for them. They come in a pack of 5, and they're all round tips, and round tips are great because you can use the barrel of the belly of the brush to make larger strokes, but then you can also just use the tip to get very, very fine lines. And that actually is very handy when you are working with watercolor and want to not have to use a whole bunch of different brushes. Now, if you want to upgrade just slightly, you can upgrade to a set that is called, that's also still by Princeton, but it's actually their Neptune series. And it's a slightly higher quality brush. And then, of course, periodically, you have to splurge. And so when I was in Paris last year, actually earlier this year, I had to go to the art supply store in Paris, and I bought this really beautiful, really fat tip, also round brush. And so I'm going to show you now what I was able to actually create with it, an imaginary poppy. And it was really fun to see both how much water this brush holds and the variety of strokes that I was able to get that you can see in these images right now. Let me move on to talk to you about pens. So my go-to pens have always been either this pack of micron pens. They are by Sakura. I love them. I also periodically use uni-pins. But right now, I am using, and I've mentioned this to you guys before, I am using this set of black liners from Molotow. And I love them. They're permanent ink, and they come in an 11 pack, so you've got all kinds of different nib sizes. The nib sizes are across the top. And I have just been using these for the last month or so, and I absolutely love them. So I wanted to make sure that I was passing that along. And they definitely made my top 12 list. Last but not least on the pen or pencil or brush supplies list are Caran d'Ache. And Caran d'Ache is a beautiful European brand of colored pencils. But they don't just have colored pencils. They also have water-soluble pencils, and they also have a variety of other really fabulous. They're Swiss-made, and they're beautiful quality. They're super soft, and I absolutely love them. And who doesn't like a set of colored pencils? I had to put them on the list. Now, the next 3 things are more personal items that I would love for you to think about to spruce up your table or your art area where you do your art in your home or in your studio. And now I do all of my art in my kitchen table, so I don't do anything fancy. I don't have a studio. I basically just all do it at my kitchen table. But I do like to have a few things around me that kind of spruce up the space or kind of make the space feel like it's really mine. And one of those is this beautiful blue pitcher. It's a beautiful blue ceramic pitcher. I put a whole bunch of my supplies in it. Mostly this is where I hold my all my brushes, my paint brushes, and it's beautiful. It's a lovely color. When I look at it, it makes me smile. And so you may have something like that around your house that you would also like to have nearby. In addition to that blue pitcher, I also use these really adorable jars. And they are actually all from, these actually are from Good Faith Farm. And there are a series of jars that contain different olives in them. So this one, which has this really beautiful colored label, is raw organic Kalamata olives, but we also have ones that have a green label, and my husband loves these olives, and so we always have them in the refrigerator, and then when we're finished with them, I always keep the jars. So I not only put some of my supplies in the jar, but I also use them to put the water in. And when I'm doing watercolor, I like to have one jar of clean water for my warm colors and one jar for my cool colors. And so these are my kind of go-to jars. They have a nice big opening so I can put a lot of supplies in them, which is also super handy when I actually need to clean up quickly if we're having people over or I just need to neaten up my space. And then finally, I usually have a candle on my space, and I'm going to show you just a couple of pictures of my space, whether I am journaling in the morning or I am getting ready to do some sketching or some painting. I love to light a candle, and I love the glow that it provides. They're usually scented. I seem to have gotten a huge collection of them over the years, and so now is just the perfect time for me to enjoy them. And so that's really the third piece that I put on my table to make it really feel like, okay, I am ready to dive into something creative now. I am ready to go. I hope that you enjoyed this video with my 12 top art supplies that I absolutely adore, and I've tested them all out. There are links below this video so that you can go check them out yourself and maybe put them on the list for either yourself or for a creative in your life who you are going to be shopping for this holiday season. I always like to say in closing that I am Anne La Follette, and it's never too late to create.